Welcome, friends, to the 41st episode of the Quintology Files. Today, we shall look at God's plan for life, revealing the ultimate theology that will blow you away. In the last few episodes, we have discussed how we now understand that DNA is the Lifeform Operating System that powers all forms of life on our planet. DNA works by assembling strings of amino acids in a defined sequence to build a gene expressing a specific shape, a shape that will perform a particular function. We can trace the evolution of individual organs over hundreds of millions of years, exactly as one would expect, with superior designs outcompeting inferior designs. Given that single-cell amoebas also use DNA, and that it took 1.5 billion years to advance from the first single cell to the first multicellular life form, hardly suggests a divine plan. Any divinity must work at a far more fundamental level. As with the design by which protons and electrons naturally combine to form hydrogen elements, and the same basic pieces can be assembled to form heavier elements and complex compounds from those elements. Perhaps the design features for self-replicating organisms are similarly baked in. Certain compound elements are somehow designed to enable amino acids to form, which may then be utilized to create the Lego bricks of genes to assemble biological functionality. Indeed, is there a parallel between chemistry and biology? We previously discussed how it seems that a divine intelligence used the number and proportions of elements in a compound to determine molecular shape, and shape determines properties, interactions, and capabilities. Now, we see a similar approach used for biology. Sequence determines shape, and shape determines functional capability. In the last few episodes, we have discussed how we now understand that DNA is the Lifeform Operating System that powers all forms of life on our planet. We understand this Lifeform Operating System works by assembling strings of amino acids in a specifically defined sequence to build a gene expressing a specific shape which will perform a particular function. That each organ requires numerous genes to assemble in a defined construction to enable it to function as intended points to some form of master plan to design an eye or a lung, etc. One might argue that such a designer master plan points to some divine direction or intervention. But, on the other hand, as we can trace the evolution of individual organs over hundreds of millions of years, exactly as one would expect, with natural selection resulting in superior designs outcompeting inferior designs. Furthermore, the fact that single-cell amoebas took over 1.5 billion years to advance from the first single cell to the first multi-cell life form rather undermines the existence of a divine plan. Any divinity must surely work at a far more fundamental level, as with the design by which protons and electrons naturally combine to form hydrogen elements, and the same basic pieces can be assembled to form heavier elements and complex compounds from such elements, perhaps the design features for self-replicating organisms are similarly baked in. Certain compound elements are somehow designed to enable amino acids to form, which may then be utilised to create Lego-like bricks of genes to assemble biological functionality. Indeed, is there a parallel between chemistry and biology? We previously discussed how it seems that a divine intelligence used the number and proportions of elements in a compound to determine molecular shape, and shape determines the properties, interactions, and capabilities of those compounds. It now appears that a similar approach applies in biology. Sequence determines shape, and shape determines functional capability.
That sounds quite a profound insight.
Wow, have we stumbled upon a fundamental truth? This actually also links with the argument that a supreme designer intended for self-replicating organisms to emerge across the universe. As we previously discussed, way back in episode 2, the basic design structure of stars, planets, and moons within each galaxy appears intended to create nurseries for the emergence of life forms. However, such knowledge does not support the notion that God created our planet, nor that God created mankind. If God, as an ultimate designer, did have a direct hand in the emergence of mankind, he does seem to be very hesitant and tentative. Life on Earth went down many dead ends and many catastrophic extinctions. This history hardly seems to fit most people's idea of a multi-omni, all-powerful God. It seems our planet and ourselves are end products of forces unleashed across the universe ages ago, well, 13.8 billion years ago. The most fundamental insight that humanity may now have gained is that an intelligence far beyond our understanding was able to plan for a universe in which 4 key capabilities would emerge at a scale that we can hardly even measure. Firstly, that a small fraction of the immensely hot initial broiling radiation which comprised the young universe would, upon cooling, condense into matter, presenting as protons, neutrons, and electrons. Secondly, that these subatomic particles would coalesce into atoms of hydrogen from which gravity would build fusion reactors, i.e. stars, which would burn themselves to the point of going supernova and thereby creating the full spectrum of elements. Thirdly, that further generations of stars would form, with those stars comprising the lightest hydrogen atoms surrounded by proto-solar systems formed from heavier elements orbiting in an equilateral plane, and with leftovers which would become moons. This 3-level structure then provides natural nurseries for life to ignite. And fourthly, that planets in Goldilocks zones with metallic cores, maintained in a molten state through gravitational stirring by heavy enough moons, would retain atmospheres which enable compounds to form, which in turn might then become amino acids, which would, when naturally stringing together in the right sequence, will produce single-cell, self-replicating organisms. As we discussed in the last few episodes, humanity has now progressed to the point where we can design and assemble our own lifeform operating system to develop life completely distinct from DNA-based life forms. In 2019, a team led by Stephen Benner of the Foundation for Applied Molecular Evolution in Florida created a form of double helix based on 8 bases instead of 4, naming it Hajimoji, 8 letters. They created double helices in which the 4 traditional bases used by DNA, A going by the letters A, T, C and G, are supplemented by Z, P, S and B. This variant operating system offers much denser data storage than Earth-based evolution has had at its disposal for the past 2 billion years. With 8 letters to play with, you could vastly increase the potential range of amino acids and proteins that might be designed for use within a single life form. The mind boggles at what types of organ functionality might be bioengineered into a life form using such awesome potential amino acid resources. Advances in sensory capture of sight, sound, smell, etc. Advances in mental computing power. Advances in dexterity. Maybe the ability to grow additional, perhaps mineral-coated limbs with the ability to extract oxygen from different atmospheric conditions on different planets. The ability to withstand radiation. Indeed, the possibilities are endless. Some people are enthusiastic to form human colonies on Mars, hoping to harness the local natural resources to support life. However, the most effective way to terraform a planet and at the same time evolve life forms perfectly suited for its environment would be to seed a planet with DNA. One would have to plan such a project on a non-human timescale, but maybe other species have already done this.
Your description of what God created is very different from conventional views. Right?
Maybe, but surely one must base any argument starting with your definition of God. I think everyone would agree that God is a name we reserve for the most senior intellect, the one who designed our universe, by determining the laws of chemistry, physics, and biology, and presumably then ignited our project with a Big Bang. On the physical level, everything that flowed from the Big Bang is action and reaction, as the initial forces that were released progressively condensed to provide the forces we detect today. For us, matter itself being the most important. Equally, all these forces obey physical laws which appear to remain constant across the entire universe, which, by definition, means throughout time. We've come to understand these chemical and physical laws, but we are astonished at the complexity, precision, and outcomes. For example, our understanding of chemistry allows us to manufacture elements and compounds that do not occur naturally, at least in the conditions on this planet. Such products often being unstable and short-lived on Earth. Whilst chemistry appears to be predisposed towards evolving terraformed life-sustaining ecosystems, it seems biology is similarly endowed with a divine predisposition to evolve towards life. I believe most scientists would agree on this analysis, particularly as the degree of precision and complexity is clearly supernatural. In the last few decades, we have made discoveries that many say constitutes proof of an intelligent design inherent in the physical laws governing matter in our universe. However, when we look at earthly life forms, additional questions arise. In the last episode, we identified discontinuities in the evolution of life on our planet. After the agonizingly slow emergence of single-cell amoeba, life forms suddenly exploded in variety and complexity. Again, after 5 million years chipping away at stones to create sharp cutting implements, humanity became civilized space travelers almost overnight. Human population and endeavor now points to not one, but possibly 2 extraterrestrial interventions to develop life on our planet. We've touched on panspermia as responsible for life originating on Earth. But there is speculation that life was deliberately seeded here, using an operating system suited to our terraformed planet. In the same way that we are now talking of seeding Mars with forms using a specially adapted variant of DNA.
Have the Abrahamic faiths conflicted 2 or more very different divinities?
Did we have help from a source we came to refer to as God? Could it be that mankind has simply confused 2 very different creators? The Abrahamic faiths teach that God created man. The well-known passage in Genesis purports that the gods, plural, created man in their plural image. Questions about the odd wording are always brushed aside. However, in its literal sense, we shall find that this may indeed reflect the truth, but certainly not in the way taught by the Church. How can I make such an outlandish claim? We are taught to believe man is different to other animals because, isn't it obvious? We humans can think. We can talk. We have memories. We have emotions. We're intelligent. Well, actually, so do many other animals. these are by no means unique traits. Elephants, with brains 4 times the capacity of humans, have been found to have extraordinary memories and also to clearly show a range of emotions. Even lowly mice have been found to use a far larger range of sounds, words, to communicate between themselves than humans do. The DNA of a pig is 96% the same as a human, whilst human DNA can itself differ by up to 0.5% within our species. So, quite how is mankind unique? Humans do not have the biggest brains. We do not have the best eyesight. We don't have the best sense of smell. We don't have the best hearing. Humans cannot run the fastest. We're not the strongest. We're not the toughest if you look at the range of temperature that we can tolerate. We do not live the longest lives, and we cannot fly without mechanical support. So why are humans so special? Well, if you think about it, surprisingly, the key differentiator is that humans can cook. All other animals devote almost their entire lives to the eating and digestion of food. Herbivores chew cellulose almost continuously, whilst carnivores have to spend time hunting and then chewing raw meat, which they can only digest during very long periods of sleep. Humanity discovered cooking, and our species was transformed. The origin of cooking was most likely from the discovery of animals burned in forest fires that had been ignited by lightning. Cooked meat not only tastes much better, but can be eaten rapidly and digested very efficiently, providing a hugely enhanced diet for a fraction of the time devoted to consuming raw meat. This set humanity on the trail to civilization. When we look for the historical references to the origin of human cooking, we find something quite intriguing. The Sumerian records, from translations of cuneiform tablets excavated from Iraq, tell of a time when men, unclothed, ate raw food in the field with their hands. This is also depicted in ancient Egyptian reliefs. Sumerian records also tell of the gods teaching men how to cook meals, specifying detailed ingredients and following cooking recipes demanded by individual gods. But when we read Genesis, there's no reference to God teaching man to cook. In Genesis, El Elyon does help Adam and Eve to make a set of clothes, but there's no mention of cooking. Much later, Yahweh finds the Israelites eating cooked food and specifies how he would like his food prepared, providing detailed butchery instructions and specifying that his bread should be baked without yeast. Well, this sort of implies that God has an allergy. In the next episode, we shall look at compelling evidence an intelligent species was involved in the design of human DNA. So don't forget to watch. Thank you very much. If you've got a question, please note below, and also express your interest by pressing the like button and subscribing to the channel. Thank you.